You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. FIFA is coming to town in less than a month. On June 15th, Belgium will take on Egypt at Lumen Field, which we're now supposed to call Seattle Stadium officially. For many local fans, this gigantic tournament coming to town can be a complicated affair. Anecdotally, I've heard more gripes about ticket prices than excitement for watching games. There are also social questions about how the games are used by authoritarian leaders to bolster nationalism. FIFA has been dogged by scandal over host country selection and TV marketing rights. But also, come on, it's the World Cup, probably the biggest sporting event of all, and one that is just so fun to watch. So how do we relate to a game that is both beautiful and run by an entity as complicated as FIFA? Jules Boykoff is a professor of political science at Pacific University and the author of the forthcoming book, Red Card, the 2026 World Cup, Sportswashing, and the FIFA Greed Machine. He's also written a memoir about his time as a soccer player titled Kicking. Jules, thank you so much for being on Soundside today. Welcome.
Thank you, Libby. It's great to be with you.
So one of the things that you look at in your book, which is coming out June 9th, is this phenomenon of sports washing. So what is sports washing, especially when it relates to the FIFA World Cup?
Sports washing is when political leaders use sports events to try to deflect attention from human rights woes at home, from social problems at home, and instead shine under the spotlight of, in this case, the World Cup and look important or legitimate on the world stage. It also involves setting up opportunities for advancing their politics and sometimes their economic interest. Usually it's used for countries like Qatar or Russia when it comes to recent World Cups for the men's side. But I'm arguing in that book that you mentioned that it should also be applied to the United States as we get ready here for the 2026 World Cup.
Tell me more about that. Why do you think sports washing should be applied to the U.S.?
Well, first, I sort of think it's just a little bit ethnocentric that it was only applied to these other countries, where in reality, if you just go by that definition that I offered there, there's a lot of reason to apply it to the United States. I mean, what would President Donald Trump be deflecting attention from? Well, I mean, his very low approval ratings, all-time low in both of his terms he's experiencing right now. The tough time that he's having in Iran. Things are not going well there. Of course, there's his long-term friendship with Jeffrey Epstein that he'd just as soon forget and have nobody talking about. There are a lot of things he'd like to deflect attention from. And this gives him a chance to look important. Let's not forget that Donald Trump, from the beginning, has been a sports fan, and he has used sports more than any president in recent U.S. history to his political advantage.
Yeah, the UFC tournament, the fights that are going to be on the White House lawn, as an example, definitely embracing sport as spectacle and also, messaging vehicle the Trump administration has. So you mentioned Russia as a host country, in 2018. That was just 4 years after the country had annexed Crimea and was accused of backing rebel groups in eastern Ukraine. Qatar in 2022 was controversial over human rights issues, also just the temperature and what that did to workers and potential safety issues. And then, we're talking about this year, the U.S. and everything that you just mentioned. Is this a more recent development, this phenomenon of sports washing, or has it been something the World Cup has always been entwined with?
Well, the term sports washing was only coined in 2015 by some human rights workers out of Europe who are interested in the upcoming European Games in Baku, Azerbaijan at that time. So the term itself is very recent. But there's elements of sports washing that go far back into history. Your listeners will know about the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, the first Olympics to feature soccer, by the way, where Adolf Hitler used that event to make himself look important and legitimate on the world stage and to deflect attention from his attacks on Jewish folks, Roma folks, others. And to be honest, it actually worked. I mean, when people ask, does sports washing work? They're often talking about an international audience. And if you look at the New York Times coverage of those 1936 Olympics, they were absolutely glowing about Adolf Hitler. I mean, he got great coverage out of the deal. So you can also look at the 1978 World Cup in Argentina, which I also write about in Red Card, and how there was a military junta in charge at that time. And they used that they used that World Cup to sound important on the world stage. And they've had none other than Henry Kissinger roll through and to talk about how they were getting a bad rap in the press and to watch a match or two with the Argentinian junta. So there's elements that go back in history, but I would argue that you really don't get the full-on sports washing with all its important emphasis on money until the 21st century, where sports becomes a trillion-dollar industry.
Let's talk about the head of FIFA, Gianni Infantino. He often cozies up to world leaders before a tournament. He had moved to Qatar to prepare for the 2022 World Cup. He had a tight relationship with Vladimir Putin leading up to the World Cup in Russia. What about this World Cup? What have you been watching when it comes to Infantino's activities and his relationship with the Trump administration?
It's absolutely remarkable, his relationship with Donald Trump. And Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, has been the sports washing enabler number one for President Trump. He has bent over backwards to help Trump at every single step of the road. Of course, there's that moment in December of 2025 where he basically made up this idea of a FIFA Peace Prize and then turned around and awarded it to President Trump. Apparently, people on the very powerful FIFA Council didn't even really know about this award. This was something that Infantino apparently came up with himself. You know, you're right. Infantino cozies up to people in power, and he's done so over the last 3 World Cups. And basically, he has a real incentive to try to keep FIFA's money spigot wide open. Let's be real. The FIFA Men's World Cup is supposed to make FIFA more than $11 billion alone. That'll make it the most revenue of any sports event in world history. And so he does what it takes. The other thing is, though, you mentioned political spectacle before. I mean, Gianni Infantino has a real penchant for trying to create political spectacle. And it seems like he just kind of genuinely likes President Trump. I mean, he even went to Melania's opening of her movie. I mean, that shows something.
Yeah. Although a number of people were there that were surprising, tech leaders and various folks showing up to that opening that you wouldn't expect. Let's talk about the economics, since you broached that, the idea that FIFA would be making $11 billion on this tournament. The cheapest tickets we could find here in Seattle are Qatar versus Bosnia and Herzegovina on June 24th for around $200. So not as insanely inflated as many tickets are going for around the country, around North America. How does FIFA make its money? I mean, is it from ticket prices?
This is one of the major ways that FIFA makes money is through tickets. There's also the large broadcast fees that it gets, as well as the corporate sponsorships that it has with various big corporations. But they're trying something new here with these tickets, and that's why you and a lot of your listeners are seeing these gobsmacking prices in the news, because FIFA's trying something called dynamic pricing. And dynamic sounds kind of cool, kind of nice, kind of exciting, but actually it's just the way of extracting the maximum that FIFA possibly can out of ticket buyers. Another one of their tricks is in the resale market. There's no cap in the United States. So that price tag can go up, up, and up. And check this out, Libby. For every ticket sold on the resale market, FIFA snatches 15% from the buyer and 15% from the seller. So we've been seeing, a good deal if you're FIFA. And they have no interest economically of reining in even that kind of pricing scheme, even though people are jumping up and down about it. I mean, I saw recently in the news there was a ticket for the World Cup final in New Jersey on sale in the resale market for $11 million. So FIFA could rake in around, $3 million or so dollars just from that single ticket alone. And so, yes, I think that is why in the subtitle of my book, I call it, talk about the FIFA Greed Machine. We're seeing that FIFA Greed Machine in full effect at this World Cup.
You mentioned no cap on reselling. That is something that other countries have looked at, like Mexico, right?
Absolutely. No, that's a pure political choice. And so in Mexico, resale value for tickets is capped at the face value of the ticket. They've also moved to do the same thing in Ontario. So ticket buyers in Toronto for the World Cup will also not see huge jumps in price. But that's not the case in the hyper-capitalist United States, where the price can go as high as the buyer will bear.
So Seattle is expected to spend about $16 million on this World Cup, a lot of that going to security. They're also getting money from state and federal grants to beef up their ability to host the games. $11 billion in profit for FIFA, $16 million outlay for at least one host city. Multiply that by across all the host cities in North America. Why do cities do this? I mean, do they get a benefit out of it?
Well, one of the reasons why cities sign on is because they're told on the front end that this is all going to be unicorns, rainbows, and lots of money in their pocket. The reality, however, is much different. I mean, the FIFA business model could be condensed into saying that the public pays, Seattle taxpayers pay, and the private entities around, they tend to profit, the corporate sponsors, the broadcasters, the advertisers, and so on. That has long been the model. I've been seeing figures of in the neighborhood of $100 million in outlays for cities who are now dialing back their public celebrations because they know they can't afford it. Meanwhile, FIFA is giving zero to these cities. I mean, you heard in the news recently, the governor of New Jersey, who they raised the ticket prices on the travel to the stadium to some whopping $150. And she got all sorts of flack for this. And she went public with the information that, look, FIFA is giving us $0. So unless I want to put this on the back of my taxpayers, I need to figure out a way of recouping costs. So unfortunately, that's just the business model that FIFA brings to the table. And now people across the United States are waking up to the reality of it now that the bill is kind of coming due.
Can FIFA be reformed? I mean, there was this huge corruption scandal that brought Gianni Infantino to power within the organization. That case was brought by the U.S. Department of Justice. Infantino promised to transform FIFA to be more transparent and accountable. What has happened since then?
Well, in 2015, there was a remarkable corruption festival that people in FIFA got caught. And a lot of us who watch sport thought, okay, this is the moment where they're finally going to reform. And in fact, that's when the current president jumped in and promised that he would, in fact, reform FIFA. But unfortunately, really nothing has changed. And in fact, there's a group in London called Fair Square. They're a human rights group that follows sports very carefully. They issued a statement not too long ago that argued FIFA is arguably more poorly governed today than a full decade ago. And they got a bunch of academics and activist groups, advocacy groups to sign on. And full disclosure, I was one of those academics that did sign that statement. And part of the reason why people feel this way is because essentially the business model of FIFA, aside from the public pays and private profits, is an enormous patronage network where the president of FIFA gives millions out to football associations around the world in order to retain their loyalty. I mean, at the most recent meetings in Vancouver, you got a glimpse at how this actually works. You had people from around the world already advocating for Infantino and endorsing him for the next presidential election, which isn't even happening until 2027. And so you've also got vice presidents and members of the FIFA Council who attend 2 to 4 meetings and make in the neighborhood of $250,000 to $300,000 a year. So, of course, they're going along with this great deal that they have and handing more and more power to Infantino. And so the whole deck is stacked in Infantino's favor, and it really doesn't help in terms of conjuring up a lot of oversight of the organization. And those are the reasons why we find ourselves in the situation that we are today.
I'm talking with Jules Boykoff, professor of political science at Pacific University and the author of the forthcoming book, Red Card, the 2026 World Cup, Sportswashing, and the FIFA Greed Machine. It's going to be out June 9th, so it'll be your companion book, folks, if you like, to the World Cup, hosted partially here in Seattle. I mean, Jules, before we go, you love soccer. I love soccer. Like, this is obviously not a benevolent organization, FIFA. It's out to make money. It doesn't really hide that intention very much. But when the World Cup comes to town, I'm going to one of the matches. I mean, I love this sport. I think the World Cup is one of the most beautiful, once you get on the pitch, one of the most beautiful events there is in terms of just pure competition, sport, the beauty of the game, the passion of the fans from all over the world. It's fun. I love it. And I know all of these, things that you've laid out for me, but I still am going to watch the tournament. I mean, how do you reconcile that yourself as a fan of the beautiful game?
I am so glad you asked that because listeners might be sitting there thinking to themselves, who is this grumpadelic academic with a knee-jerk built-in penchant for slamming my favorite sport? And, like you just pointed out, I played professional soccer. I had the good fortune of representing the under 23 men's national U.S. soccer team in international matches, played against Brazil back in the day. I have fond memories of playing professional indoor soccer in the beautiful city of Seattle. I played in Key Arena. I remember one night I had a magical night where I was staying in the same hotel as Ziggy Marley, and he patted me on the back, and I went out that night and scored 4 assists. It was an all-timer for me. So I've got all sorts of personal fun memories about soccer, and I love the sport. And here's the thing. I don't think we need to devote ourselves to the death of complexity. We can both critique the heck out of FIFA and demand more out of them and appreciate these athletes, these worker athletes, if we're really going to be honest about it, who bring so much joy to this world. I mean, soccer brings community. It forges community that can go on down through the generations. And so, I think soccer is worth fighting for. I don't support what FIFA's doing with it, but I think it's such a valuable thing in society that we should still continue to link our elbows together and fight for it to get better for the world.
Jules Boykoff, the book is called Red Card, the 2026 World Cup, Sportswashing, and the FIFA Greed Machine. You can pre-order it now. It's out June 9th. Thank you so much, Jules. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Libby.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.